Hey, Shanielle, and welcome to Voice Notes from the Organized Homeschool. I'm so excited to chat with you and get to learn from you and get to share our conversation with others so that you can impact other homeschooling moms who might need a little more inspiration, motivation, tips, tricks, resources, whatever it is we share in this conversation. Looking forward to it. So let's just jump in. You can start by just sharing a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your homeschool. So, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, maybe your background or your children's ages, your homeschool type, how long you've been homeschooling, whatever you feel good about sharing to start us off, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shanielle Pabon. I am a holistic health coach, and I have been homeschooling my three children now for 2 years. My oldest is 6, and my middle child, she is 3. She'll be 4 this fall, and my youngest is 7 months. My background is pretty different than my actual current career path. So I am actually a Marine Corps veteran turned homesteader and health coach. I was enlisted around the time of 2014 up until 2018 when I got out because I found out I was pregnant with my first child. Then after I got out, I actually decided to pursue a degree in business management. So I went on ahead and did that. And when I was about halfway through, I found myself really gravitating towards health and wellness because of certain losses I had in my family and watching a lot of people's health deteriorate. And around that time, it was post pandemic briefly. So a lot of people were really freaking out about health and wanting to understand how to protect themselves from that particular illness. So I decided to go to the School of Integrative Nutrition, where I had gotten my health coaching certification while I was simultaneously full time in college. And I had actually started the process of homeschooling my now 6 year old. And it definitely was difficult. I did not know what I was doing. And now we are here.
Okay, I have so many questions because, like you said, your background is different than where you currently are at, and you have, I'm going to say, made it through. That makes it sound like it was like really rough. You did say it was difficult, but like you have now gotten to the end of your second year of homeschooling. So I just have a lot of questions, but let's just start with, why did you decide to homeschool your oldest when you first started? Like, what was your why? And is that the same why now? Has it shifted? What is your why for homeschooling?
So that is actually a really good question. And no one's ever asked me that before. Honestly, I can for sure say that my why has changed. I started homeschooling initially with my first, honestly, just because of like mom guilt. You see other kids on like social media who are able to like come home from school and, do all these things and are hyper independent. And I thought that my son was kind of behind. And it kind of was scary because no mom wants to think, hey, like, I'm doing something wrong. So I started to implement things like educating him on his ABCs a lot sooner than I think most parents do. We started, I believe he was like 2 years old when we really started. And then by the time he was 3 years old, he was fully potty trained. My why now, I would say, is really because I just don't trust the current school system when it comes to safety. I don't want to have to worry about dropping my kids off in a location and they're not entirely safe. Also, their quality of life while they're in these locations, the types of meals that they may be receiving. And if you want them to be in a more prestigious school, then obviously that's going to cost more money. And so is homeschooling. So I figured, you know what? Nobody else will be able to better educate my child than I will. And in the event that I am struggling in certain areas and they need more support, then yeah, I'll pay for tutors and take them to places where they can get that additional help. But that is my current why now.
Yes. I am totally with you, especially with the safety piece. Like, it just didn't sit well with me. I like dropping my son off and feeling nervous and anxious all day around like what's he experiencing, and Is he okay? Like all those things. So I totally feel you on that. Okay, talk to us about what a typical day looks like for you for your homeschooling, and typical day and typical week, like if that is even a thing. But what's the usual day and week looking like?
So, a typical week in our homeschooling routine is Monday through Thursday. We basically alternate between two of the main subjects. So, Monday and Wednesdays, we do their ELA, so like writing, a little bit of reading, and we also focus on like critical thinking. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we focus on math. We are currently using Singapore math. That's what it's called. And we homeschool year round currently, just only because when I was pregnant with my third child, we had to kind of take a break because I was in and out of the hospital. So I couldn't consistently homeschool. And I felt like my kids had kind of fallen behind during that time span. So I wanted to get them back on track. So we're currently homeschooling 360. And I think that it's something that we're going to continue to do. I try to keep things because I am a business owner. I try to keep things kind of like on a simplified kind of basis. So I try to, well, not try to, I do meal plan and prep throughout the week. So that way my kids already have meals that are easily accessible or quick for me to put together, especially for lunch and breakfast. And then for dinner, I usually kind of wing it, but I have like something in mind. And that's pretty much what's going on. Outside of their school schedule, because we are homesteaders, my kids do spend a lot of time out in nature doing a lot of free play, whether that's with their Magna-Tiles, with their Legos, messing around with our chickens, or frolicking through the garden, riding their bikes, just being kids and getting to experience that freedom without having to worry about, oh, is a car gonna hit me, or oh, do I have to worry about my safety with like, how the world is these days. Kids go missing all the time. So I love having that ability to do that right now. Yeah, and that's about it.
Okay, so good. So much good information. And I love the structure you have of like ELA and math on different days so that it's not too overwhelming because it can be easy to try to do all the things every day and it's just a no. It's just a no. It's too much. So tell me about your planning process. I heard you say you're using Singapore math. If you have any other curriculum that you're using that you like, or even if you are like, I'm not sure about it yet, but you're still using it, like definitely love to hear what you're using. And then what does a planning process look like for you from week to week? And then we've got to get into business and also meal planning. So don't answer those things yet, but just like have it ready because I want to talk about both of those. But let's start with your planning process for like academics. If you have one, how are you planning out your weeks, your days, and your lessons?
Yes, I'm super excited to talk about those other things, primarily because, this is what I do for work. So it's my passion. But as far as the scheduling is concerned, we don't necessarily have a schedule. And I think that it's funny because you had mentioned like trying to do everything at once can be really stressful. And that was something that I tried to do. So I was doing all of the things that I had seen online and thought that I should be doing, where I was attempting to make homeschool like regular school. And I noticed that my kids were getting burned out. For like an example, we would try to do like all of the subjects: math, science, English, reading, writing. I don't know if I missed any, all in one day though. And it got to a point where I was like, you know what? Like, this isn't sustainable. My kids are getting burned out. And like, after like 45 minutes, sometimes maybe just an hour of school. So, what we started to do was I just map out time every single day, or 4 days a week, I mean, just for one subject primarily for them, where we're doing that for 30 minutes or something like that. And I kind of like knock it down, like, say, like for our math curriculum, if it's a little bit like 5 pages or something like that for my son's math lesson, then I'll chop it in half because I'll notice like he's getting fatigued. So I kind of like to do it like intuitively. But as far as like planning and things are concerned, Because of our lifestyle, we are homesteaders. So we are constantly kind of like having to go with the flow. So we don't necessarily have a rigid structural plan. And I actually like that. It kind of goes against what a lot of homeschoolers are told to do. And it kind of leads more towards unschooling, but with a twist because obviously we do use curriculums. Now, for the ELA curriculum, we currently don't have an ELA homeschool curriculum. I've kind of just been winging it because my son is left handed and my daughter, she is right handed. And like I said, they're like 2, almost 3 years apart. So I'm kind of like doing what I have to do and to kind of like keep them not too far off away from each other. So that way it motivates my daughter to do the homeschooling and want to have a good relationship with learning. But yeah, for our ELA curriculum that I've been looking into, it's called the Logic of English. We don't exactly have it yet, but I've been looking into it just because I want to kind of structure how my son is learning how to read. He's already like trying to do it, but I've noticed like some gaps, so I kind of want to fill that in, if that makes sense.
Okay, yes, this all makes complete sense. We actually started using, well, last year was our first year, but we started out using Math with Confidence. And one of the reasons why I love that curriculum is the lessons are really quick and like the workbook page is always one page for kindergarten. And even in the first grade, it's one page per day and it's 4 days, 4 lessons a week. So it's just very manageable. Just to speak to the point, your point about like, I might have to cut down the pages, and we're also looking into Logic of English for this year too, so it's so funny. But let's get into this homesteading. I see this all over the internet and I feel like I have an idea of what homesteading is, but like tell us about what homesteading looks like for you and your family. And have you always been a homesteading family? Have you like transitioned to that, and why? And yeah, we can just start there about like why homesteading, what does it look like for you, and then we'll go from there.
Since moving from our suburban paradise and into what some people would call the trees or the wilderness, we have actually noticed how our quality of life has changed drastically as far as improvement. Like, I don't know if any of your listeners know, but there is actual scientific evidence proving that being immersed in nature, even if it's like only once a week, but it does help your mental health. Like something about seeing the color green, something about seeing the color brown, something about hearing the birds chirping, the frequency of like the bees, wings buzzing, like that actually has so many benefits for our mental health. I will say though, for any mother who is listening to this who is considering homesteading, just because we changed locations did not make my kids like this picturesque, like always listening. Like, no, we still deal with like temper tantrums and behavioral issues. It's just how we manage them and what they look like are different because of our living circumstances. So, like, my kids aren't getting cabin fever because they're spending a lot of time outside and running around and being kids and having fun, even if that means that they're playing with their magnetiles like somebody would do in the suburbs or in an apartment or in a condo, whatever. So, for example, right, like when we got our chickens, yeah, we don't have to eventually because, first of all, chickens do not lay year round. They lay more in the warmer months, and then when it's cooler, they lay eggs less. And then you also have to pay for the chicken feed. You also have to pay for like bedding for them to sleep and keeping their chicken coop clean and hygienic. And depending on if your chickens and stuff start like fighting, then you also have to like purchase toys or like little things for them to do so that way they don't attack each other because that is also a thing. I want to say first moved out here. We've been currently living full time on this particular piece of property slash homestead for about almost 4 months now. And we started to notice some hiccups like right away, like the location of the property. Like we couldn't get something as simple as like a mailbox, which is insane, like, well, why not? So that's kind of how like it all comes into play, like for our lifestyle. And it may not make sense for everybody, or if it does, make sure that you're doing your research, because not having a property without utilities and not planning to get those utilities installed before you purchase it long term for us. And so we started off like looking into what it would look like to live off of the grid, and what it would look like, to have, acres or a certain amount of land. And after we had gotten married, or maybe a little bit before we had gotten married, I was like 26, about to be 27, and I had purchased 40 acres worth of land out in West Texas. And that's currently where we're staying at. But it took us a long time to stay here because I was chasing after what I was seeing on the internet. Like glamping was really popular during that time. So, like, I bought like a $1,500 glamping tent, and it got destroyed because it couldn't withstand the elements. So then we tried like modifying like a carport tent, which also didn't work, and all these different things failed before we kind of gave up temporarily and then moved to the suburb. Yeah. Because I just want to be clear about that, because homesteading is like so romanticized. Everybody sees like this majestic mom with her kids, like, standing outside, and they're picking food from their garden, and they're just outside, and everybody's like, oh my God, they have chickens and ducks. And it's like, yeah, they do. But like, why do they have these things? And a lot of people believe like, oh, it's to save money. How they should be going about this. What are some things that they would need to have for their specific, quality of life? Like what we wanted when I first purchased this property is completely different from what we plan on doing when we purchase our next property. We're actually in the process of selling this property because we realized like the terrain, it costs a lot to do the most basicest things due to the soil quality. So we're going to find another property in East Texas. So moving 6 hours across the state of Texas in order for us to even do the things that we want to do a lot easier and to save a lot more money. Because, like I said, my husband does work in construction, so he knows how to work heavy machinery. And if you can only dig like here, because it's so rocky out here, we can only dig like 2 feet deep into the ground, versus moving further east where we can dig like 6 feet plus deep because the soil is more loam and like clay. So it's a lot better. I found myself wanting to start a farm. And because I am a health coach, being like in my community and providing like ethically sourced food, because not a lot of people have done research, like thorough research on the companies that we are receiving our food from, whether it's processed foods or even just like fruits and vegetables. Like a lot of these farms are doing more harm than good, or the things that are actually labeled as organic and things like that aren't necessarily that, due to the pesticides that are in the air, or whatever their farming processes are that are harming our planet. So I wanted to give people the opportunity to learn how to garden, and then also give people the opportunity to. So, just to be clear, my family and I lived 3 years in the suburbs, and we bought this newly built, new construction home here in Texas. It was a big house, the biggest house I had ever lived in my life. And I was super excited. Everything was like brand new. And, I had that shiny syndrome, shiny eye syndrome. And I started to notice, like, first of all, like the traffic was crazy. It felt like you had to pay to play to do almost anything. There weren't really that many outdoor spaces. When we did walk around our neighborhood, like it was just houses on top of houses on top of houses. There was really no sense of community. Also, we lived in an HOA community. So like, but we were constantly like dealing with restriction after restriction, like, oh, you have to keep your grass cut, oh, you have to do this, oh, you have to do that, oh, you can't do this. And I remember this one girl that I had met living in that area, who was also a homeschooling mom. I met her at the park, and she told me like, Yeah, I plan on getting some chickens and stuff soon. And not even a week later, the HOA sent everybody out like an email like, hey, you can't have any farm animals or anything like that, even in your backyard. It's against the HOA policy, which was crazy. But the simplicity in it is actually really good for your family, for my family dynamic. We've become a lot more closer. We spend a lot more time in nature than before, like going to state parks and things like that. When before we moved, it was like, oh, we have to come out of pocket because we have to take our kids to this museum, or we have to spend like all of this money just to go to a botanical garden, just to be immersed in nature, because there really wasn't that type of opportunity living in a large city like San Antonio, which has, I believe, 100.9 thousand people. So it's a pretty large city compared to where we live now, where the closest city has like 40,000 people, and the next closest city has like less than 5,000 people, because most people out here are ranchers and own ranches. Can definitely bite you in the butt on the back end, because it might cost you like 100K or less than 120K to purchase a property. But once you purchase that property, if the soil is not good and you're thinking like, oh, I'm just gonna have a well dug, like it can only be like 5 to 10K, and then come to find out like they're charging you 30K and you don't have the money saved up for that. Like, it definitely can feel like you're being bamboozled or lied to, because on social media they make it look so simple. Like, oh, I just got a house built on my land and we're doing this, that, and the third. And it's like, look, go to Tractor Supply, go to Home Depot, and really look at all of the things that these people are claiming that they have or that they're showing you on the internet. And look how much that stuff is costing. And then think to yourself, how are they, first of all, affording this? And then, second of all, how is it realistic for you and your family? And what things may need to be just completely disregarded for the lifestyle that you want to live? For like the chicken coop to even be built like that, we only have like an 8 by 8 structure, which is the size of like our previous home's walk-in closet. And that cost us, I want to say, like 400, maybe $500 in total to build the most basicest thing. And people see these things on Pinterest and they're like, oh, I can build this out of pallet wood. And I brought it up to my husband, who works in construction. And he was like, yeah, we could build it out of pallet wood, but this is not going to last long term if we do it that way, because the pallet wood isn't pressure treated. So you have to buy pressure treated wood, or you have to build a wide enough roof so that way the wood doesn't get wet. And even then, you can't guarantee it, because if it's storming and the wind is blowing, then the wood is going to get wet, meaning that it's going to deteriorate a lot faster. And then you're going to have to find another place for your chickens to live. On top of, if you're building this stuff out of wood, like termites, predator proofing. Something that we learned, like skunks are predators to chickens. We originally started off with like 5 chickens, and like 3 of them, actually 6 chickens, because I wasn't counting the mother, but we originally started off with one mother hen and 5 chicks, and 3 of her chicks got like massacred by a skunk. And it was really devastating because we didn't realize like the types of predators that were out here. And I just want to be honest with you, because I was under the same impression when we moved out here and we got chickens. And I was like, okay, like, we're going to save so much money on pastured raised, or, quote unquote, organically raised, ethically raised chickens. And my husband kind of like sat down and he pulled me to the side and he was like, you realize like we're actually going to be paying the exact same, like we're just breaking even. We're not necessarily saving money. And it dawned on me when he explained it to me, like, you're not actually saving money, and that this lifestyle is just kind of cutting out the middleman in a sense. And it is expensive, especially up front. So that's something to keep in mind for if anybody is considering starting a homestead, because this is not have it just hasn't been an easy journey, and it's causing us to really think about the things that are the most important to us moving forward, because it costs a lot upfront to do certain things because of the location of how far we are off of the main road. Like, nobody's gonna come and drive like 30 minutes off of a dirt road to come and drop off your mail. So it's like, dang, like, okay. And I thought, like, okay, I can live with that. Like, that sucks a little bit, until we started trying to get things delivered to a PO box, and it's like, we can't get this delivered because it's too heavy, or because it has batteries in it. Like, trying to get like a new chainsaw for like $150 from Amazon, compared to trying to get it from like Home Depot or Lowe's, where you're spending like $300 to $500 on a chainsaw or a shed, and you can get it a lot cheaper purchasing it offline. We didn't have those opportunities anymore. And because we live so far away from family, like 3 hours away, it's a lot more difficult to get it brought to us, because they're not going to bring it. They work a traditional 9 to 5. So we have to drive out there. And, who wants to really drive 3 hours away, on top of, working a traditional 9 to 5 like my husband does, and then spending all that money on gas, when like we could have just gotten it delivered here in the first place? Or that money that we're spending buying the cheaper product, we're paying for it in gas. So you might as well just buy it at Home Depot or Lowe's. So it can become like quite complex. But let me circle back around, because I feel like I'm all over the place. So I'm sorry about that.
Yes, that was super helpful, at least to me. I'm sure it will be helpful to a lot of other people. And you definitely did debunk quite a few myths, starting with the aesthetic piece. And, you have to remember about anything with social media is these are people trying to create something that will grab folks' attention. So, you know, the general consensus, I think, is that like, or even belief, maybe not consensus, the belief is that, oh, if I create something that is aesthetically pleasing, more people are going to enjoy it, like it, follow me, engage with me, do all the things that we want them to do on social media. And so therefore, that's the part that I'm going to show. And whether or not that's true, that's just what's kind of out there right now. So I appreciate you being like, it's not always pretty. And then like breaking down the finances piece, it's like, look, this is not even, sharing transparently, you thought you were going to be saving money. Like, this is not necessarily the case. There's like all of this money that goes into it, and chickens fighting, like, what? Oh my gosh. So it's funny because my husband grew up right outside of Boston. I grew up in upstate New York, but not in, Boston is a definitely bigger city than anywhere where I grew up, but we actually were living in a condo, like literally in a town center with a grocery store that we could walk to, a Costco that we could walk to. Like you mentioned traffic, this was crazy in my opinion. And that was part of the reason we were like, okay, we need to move a little bit further away from all of the people and the things. And so now we live in suburbs. Like, I think our total lot is like half an acre. So we're far, 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 far behind where you are with your 40 acres. And we have, like, across the street from us is a bigger house, not a bigger house, but a bigger lot. And they have cows. And I, like, but like last year when we first moved here, we've only lived here for a year, I would post on social media and be like, these are my neighbors now. Like, I'm just shocked by the whole thing. So, I'm not saying I would never have chickens, because I think I kind of maybe like that at some point. But to your point, like, you have to actually take care of them and pay for them. And, my son wants a pet so badly. And I'm just like, I have a 1-year-old. I don't think I can take care of a pet and a 1-year-old. So you are doing it. And, I know I want to get into your business next, because, part of what you mentioned, and I think this is for homesteading, homeschooling, whatever direction families choose to go in, is like, know your why. And for you, you mentioned like a lot of this is about health, right? And like the being in nature part and how that impacts physical, mental, emotional, so many parts of your health, about how the food that we eat is super important. And so you're a health coach. So can you tell us more about like what you do outside of homeschooling, what that looks like? Please share as much as you want. And then how do you balance or juggle? I just finished a conversation with someone, and Destiny is her name, and she was like, I don't use the word balance, I use the word juggle, and I'm starting to incorporate that too. And I think, I've been for a while talking about it's not really a balance. There's never really this perfect like seesaw 50-50 on each side. There's just too much stuff happening in life. So how do you juggle homeschooling, homesteading, your business, anything else you have going on? Like, share all the tips and tricks. But let me know first about your business, your health coaching, all of that. And then what does that juggle look like for you?
I love that. That is so cool about the cows living beside you in the suburbs. We kind of had something similar, not too far. I want to say maybe like 45 minutes from our neighborhood. There was a farm, and we used to go there at one point in time, like once a week to get raw milk. But once I had gotten pregnant, and then obviously we moved, so we don't do that anymore, but we used to, and it was like really fun to see the animals and inspirational for me. And I was able to see like how much animals actually cost because I had never really looked into it. So, as far as health coaching goes, I want to give you and your listeners a backstory first. So, back during the pandemic, I had decided that enough was enough. My son, my oldest, had like severe eczema, and it was just becoming really stressful. And also, like, I was battling with PTSD, which I had gotten diagnosed with as well. So, I just knew that there had to be another way to go about health and to learn about health. At the time, I was vegan, and I thought that anything that said vegan on it was healthy. So I ended up going to an online institution called the Integrative School of Nutrition for my health coach certification. And that was after my daughter was born. I had started that. So that was around like 2021 time frame, and it was amazing. I would definitely recommend that school to anybody who is wanting to become certified. But just know that just because you get one certification doesn't necessarily mean like it's a one-stop shop, like you have to keep going to dive deeper into particular topics. So now it's going into what it is exactly I do. So I help mothers and women debunk and navigate this whole healthy lifestyle landscape. So there is a lot of misconceptions and confusion that is thrown out for marketing. It's also known as greenwashing, where essentially they use terminology that confuses the consumer in a way that they believe that it's something healthy. So, for example, say like you go to a grocery store and you see like cows painted on the walls, and they're just kind of like walking around freely. And then you see whatever else farm stuff they want to show you at the grocery store, but they don't show you the truth about like factory farming and how your eggs that you may be getting off of that shelf might actually be like tens of thousands of chickens, like shaved or whatever, stuck in one building in the dark. They don't get any light. They're trampling over each other. They're dying. They aren't getting the proper nutrients and vitamins that they need. So then when you're eating the byproduct of them, which is their eggs, you're not even getting enough nutrients, and you're wondering why you're deficient in certain things. And that also takes into account things like where we get our fruits and vegetables from, the soil quality, the types of farming practices that they're using. Is organic really organic? What is free range? What is pasture raised? All these different things. And I really create customizable plans for each one of my clients where they can understand like what it is exactly that they're eating. And in the event, like right now, I'm working with someone who has like severe anemia, and she's had it since she was a child. So I'm helping her like navigate, how exactly to eat for that condition. So that way she doesn't necessarily have to rely on the current pharmaceutical medications that she's taking, that she's actually having a reaction to, and she wants to stop taking them. So I help women really with things like that. I've helped other women who weren't mothers lose over 20 pounds because she wanted to lose weight. She was in the military and in a competitive industry. And as a veteran myself, I understand what that landscape kind of looks like. So I helped her navigate that so that way she could feel confident in the career path that she chose. There's also a lot of moms out here who really just want a healthier lifestyle. It's the poster child of social media where everybody's like, oh, my kid is like, non toxic this and these types of dyes are like negatively going to affect my kid's mental health and things along that nature. But not a lot of people have even taken the time out to research the history of the basic things like synthetic dyes. Like, synthetic dyes have been around for a very long time, and the actual very first one was called, I think, Modeville or Modile, something like that. I don't remember the exact pronunciation of it, but it caused cancer and was killing so many people. And then they ended up getting rid of it. It was like an ambery color red dye. They got rid of it and then they replaced it with red dye. And every single time they replace it with a different synthetic red dye that's supposed to be more healthier. And the reality is, like, we can't rely on all chemicals because plants also have chemical compounds in them. So that's another misconception that's going on, like in the health journey that people are on, where they're like, oh, this is chemical free. And it's like, honey, I hate to break it to you, but essential oils are chemicals and you can have an allergic reaction to it. You can like get sick from consuming too much of a particular herb. Like, there are parameters and boundaries around a lot of different things. And by no means necessary am I against Western medicine. I believe that all forms of medicine have their place. So I don't try to sway whoever I'm working with to be anti, going to the doctor, because I believe, like, unless you are willing to pay out of pocket to go to a naturopathic doctor, which they're not even recognized in all of the states in America. So you might not even be able to find a person who specifies in that type of medicine. But if you are able to afford that, then, kudos to you. But most people, we need to go to a traditional medical institution here in the West and get our blood drawn. We need to know at the minimum, even if you don't go every 6 months or, continuously doing checkups, at least, especially for adults, we need to go at least once a year to get our blood work done, at minimum twice a year. Because how are you going to know that you have a deficiency in something? And another thing that I sit down and work with my patients is I actually get a copy, I have them send it to me, their blood work, and I interpret them and tell them, like, hey, like, these are what these markers are meaning. This is what this is saying. This is something to look out for in the future. And this is how we can change your diet and lifestyle in the now. So that way we can prevent any type of oncoming diseases or anything like that that may be coming up, because a lot of people are under the assumption like there's nothing we can do, like disease is hereditary. No, it's not 100% hereditary. It has been scientifically proven that if you are to change your diet and lifestyle, then you are actually able to change the outcome. Like, you can change how your genes and your cells actually react to your daily life, like in the long term, which is something that people really need to realize. Like, even something simple outside of being a health coach, I also went to school for personal training, where I learned a lot more about how we can use physical exercise as well as a form of preventative medicine. And a lot of women, especially women who are under the age of 35 and leading up to over 35, it is really important that we start to incorporate resistance training and weight bearing exercises. A lot of women are afraid to lift weights, which rightfully so, because you can hurt yourself if you're not using the proper biomechanics, like making sure you're stacking your bones and your joints properly so that way you're not causing any issues long term there. But we do need to incorporate strength training, because if you don't, as we age, there is nothing currently that I'm aware of that will help women with osteoporosis outside of causing microscopic fractures from weight bearing exercises, which will cause your bones to thicken up. So while they may be hollowing out internally, externally, your bone is thick enough where it can sustain your entire life and you're less likely to deal with fractures and things like that as we age because it is harder to recover from these things as we age. Like I see so many women like in their 60s who have to get hip replacement or hard surgeries. And the older that we get, like if you're in like your 70s or even in your 60s and you get these types of surgeries, like if you, God forbid, like you become depressed, like you are 80% on up more likely to pass on because you don't have the mental fortitude, because something as simple as taking away your mobility will drastically affect your mental health. And this is all scientifically proven. You all can like Google this if you want to. But, things like that. Also, there are preventative medicines for things like almost anything that you can really think of. Like, I help women ranging from like gastrointestinal problems, mental health, physical health, like, say, like you're dealing with like severe like fibromyalgia, or you're constantly having like pain within your body. Like, yes, it could be a nerve thing, but it could also be like that your body needs more muscle, because muscle is also another determinant of your longevity long term. So there's a lot of different things that I do. It's multifaceted. I am not a I didn't go to school, I guess, for nutrition. So I am not like a nutritionist. I can't sit here and like create like a full-fledged dietary plan. But what I can do is I can inform my clients about like, hey, like these are foods that do X, Y, and Z. They have these types of vitamins and minerals in them, as well as here are some herbs that you can combine with these foods in order to make sure that you're absorbing your proper nutrients. Let's change your lifestyle. Let's get some movement in there a little bit more. Let's, start looking at your mental health. Let's start dissecting that and figuring out how to make microscopic, sustainable habits that you can start to slowly incorporate into your daily life. And before you know it, you will feel a lot better. And I honestly feel like this is something that Western medicine is really missing, and Eastern medicine has completely nailed it. And it's really unfortunate. I've actually looked into getting my own naturopathic doctor's license so that way I could do the blood work side of things and really be there with my patients through each step. Obviously, outside of surgery, because I do not want to be a surgeon. I love the surgeons out there, but that's just not for me. But right now, based off of where I am, doing homeschooling and stuff, I don't have the time, obviously, to get the certifications, because that's many, many years of school to get your naturopathic doctor's license. And I would have to go private practice anyway, because here in Texas, where I'm currently residing in, they don't even acknowledge NDs, naturopathic doctors. They only look at people who are MDs, meaning that either I'd have to get both or I would have to go, like I said, private practice. So that's what I do. I have so much content that I share with people about how to really change their lifestyle and what that really looks like and what that means for them, because it kind of varies from person to person. I don't believe that any food is a bad food, okay? There are just foods that you should eat more than you eat others. So, for example, say like sugar, right? Sugar is obviously not the best thing for us. It's actually 8 times more addictive than the hard drug cocaine. And a lot of Americans don't realize it, and that we're addicted to sugar and we're wondering why we're overweight, because our body is burning sugar for energy. It's not burning the fat for energy, meaning that our body is storing the fat because it thinks like, oh, well, in the event that famine happens or this person doesn't eat, then I need these stores so that way this person can have the energy necessary to survive and they won't die right away. The body and the mind are actually so intelligently made and crafted by, whatever higher power you believe in. I think that it's actually really remarkable when you look at it on a scientific level, what exactly we are capable of, but a lot of people aren't educated. We are told so often like, hey, like fat is bad for us. You shouldn't eat fat because it can cause high cholesterol and clog your arteries, and it can affect your heart health, which number one heart disease is the first. Heart disease is still the number one cause of death in America, and that really has to deal with cardiovascular health, meaning that we need to get our heart rates elevated within certain parameters, not just to lose weight and to get skinny, but also just so that way our heart can continue to run healthy. There are also scientists like Dr. Joe Dispenza who have found that there are like your mental health and your internal frequency of how you're thinking about things and navigating life actually affects your heart. Like if you're constantly sad and constantly depressed and constantly stressed, like all of the time, those negative emotions are going to be stored somewhere. And they sometimes are stored inside of your body as trauma, which can affect how your organs are properly functioning. And over time, it will cause them to wear down. I could talk about this topic all day long. I love, 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 love my line of work. And I think that a lot of women should be aware, especially mothers, because we are obviously stewarding the next generations. And if we don't really understand how to properly eat or take care of ourselves, because they're going off of everything we see on the internet, like right now, people are seeing like, juice cleanses and take, this type of herb and do this and do that, which I'm not against some of those things, but I really want to give my clients like the real nitty gritty behind those things, like not just the fluffy, cute marketing stuff, but like, hey, like this is the danger in using these things, and this is how you can properly incorporate simple things like fasting or using different types of herbs or colloidal silver or whatever it is that they want to use, because I believe that, you know, medicine and your family is a part of your culture. The best way I can describe this is that when I was growing up as a child, I was raised primarily by my great grandmother, and she's now 87, and I'm 30, by the way, for anybody listening. And my great grandmother, she used to make like these concoctions when I was younger. Like they would take an onion and they would boil it on the stove. They might add like a little bit of rum in there or like a brown liquor and maybe some cinnamon as well. And then they would have us drink it. It was disgusting. But I tell you one thing, it would have you sweat so much to the point where the next day you had more energy. And I didn't know what that was about. I remember going out with my great grandmother's older sister out in her backyard, and she didn't even have a garden. She just had wild plants growing, and she would help me identify herbs. Specifically, her favorite was mint. So she would have me pick the mint and smell it and like maybe even like bite a little bit, and then we would make a tea out of it and drink it together and really like sit with that herb and feel what it was doing for and inside of our bodies. And then many years later, I found out that that was called herbal medicine. I didn't know that, obviously. And my great grandmother, she used to tell me how she did all these fad diets and things to be healthy. And, she's lived a long time. But when I looked back at how and why she's living such a long time for her to be 87 and her mother lived to be almost 100 years old, it was because they were gardening. A lot of their foods were homegrown. They knew where it was coming from. They knew what was going into the soil. They knew where their animals were coming from, and they were eating significantly less processed foods. What a lot of people aren't aware of, yes, those processed foods are delicious. Even I find myself occasionally nibbling on some processed foods, especially if I'm out and about with my family. I have 3 kids, and you just need a snack because you haven't eaten in hours, or that might be your first meal of the day. But what we aren't aware of is that if your body continuously eats processed foods, it's not getting the proper nutrition that it needs because it can't absorb it, because these chemicals that are inside of the food can't even properly be broken down inside of our bodies. And for those who are constantly eating like at home, you might be able to attest to this. We cook at home about 6 days a week. that one day a week when we eat processed foods, it is an immediate observation for me and my family where our body is trying to get rid of it. Either we have to hurry up, and go use the restroom to get the byproduct out of our body, or like we're feeling like a little bit more sluggish, a little bit more tired, and we can obviously notice it, and it's kind of scary because when you look on social media, when you look on cable, or even if you don't have those things and you're just scrolling on YouTube or whatever, anywhere where you see or hear commercials, they are broadcasting cheap foods that are heavily processed foods and saying, oh, like you can save money. And it's like, might be able to save a few dollars up front here and there, but you're not going to save in the end when you are old and you're going to be in and out of the hospital having to deal with those medical bills. Or, or if you're lucky and you have the ability to cook from home, then you can save money that way as well, just by buying whole foods and processing them on your own. So, for example, instead of purchasing pre made boiled eggs or pre-made oatmeal bars, or things along those lines, or even like crackers or cookies, like you can literally get some flour, some eggs, some butter, maybe some sugar or a sugar alternative, which is another thing that I help my clients with, because some of them may be experiencing diabetes and stuff, so they really need to be educated and dialed in on the glycemic index and understanding what sugars or sugar alternatives can spike or don't spike their blood sugar. And if you are listening to this, guys, please stay away from Splenda. Splenda has been scientifically proven to cause issues like anal leakage and also like gastrointestinal issues long term. So please stay away from that, because that is not the alternative sugar I'm talking about. I'm in reference to like less refined cane sugars or agave, date sugar, coconut sugars. There's a lot of like other sugars, monk fruit, what is it, erythritol or something like that. I can't really ever pronounce that word, but those are alternatives as well. So that's what I do in short. I know that was probably a little long, but there's so much I can share with people, and I'm currently open for taking any I'm currently open for taking any clientele that is interested in really just having a quick conversation, even if you don't want to work with me, so that way I can help you. And I have tons of free resources as well on my social media channels. So, as far as balancing or juggling motherhood, working as a health coach, and, just being a business owner and homeschooling, honestly, I don't know. That's a really good question. So, to be completely honest, I actually just keep like my herbal supplements on standby. My first one that I love to grab is actually lemon balm. So, it helps your body metabolize stress. So, that's like my go to. But also, I try to set up like different systems that kind of help me navigate my balancing act of wearing all of the hats, especially if my husband's at work or something like that and I have to figure it out on my own. It's definitely not easy. And for the moms who may be struggling with this, especially for newer moms, I've noticed like just getting a grip on like the realization, like, oh my gosh, like I'm a stay-at-home mom, or I work and my husband or my partner, they leave and I'm here by myself with this kid, and it may feel like you don't necessarily get a break, especially if you're not leaving the house. I want to really speak to them in this moment and say, you really have to find ways, even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes, where you can do something that will pour back into you so that way you can keep your mental sanity. And I am definitely not like the candid person that's like standing in the forefront for this, because even I personally struggle with balancing doing all of this stuff at the same time. And it's okay to struggle. Like, don't let anybody tell you that it's not healthy or that it's not realistic or that you're being dramatic, because you are experiencing stressors with trying to homeschool, be the mom. And if you are working, or even if you're not working, just homeschooling and being a mom is hard. So yeah, it's definitely something that I use, like I said, I just use my adaptogens to kind of help me, because if not, I can kind of find myself in a place where I may like teeter into like, a negative place where I might just find myself sitting on a couch for like an hour, not necessarily being productive. And it's okay to have rest, but like everyone knows their personal limits, where they're like, okay, like I've been sitting here on this couch for a really long time. Like I'm in like a brain fog. Like I can't even focus. I don't feel motivated. Like what is going on? Clearly something is happening. So I use that, my adaptogens, and then also I use physical fitness to kind of help me out as well. So if I'm really feeling like I'm in a low place with balancing this stuff mentally, then I'll go on ahead and I'll pick up something heavy and I'll put it down. Or I recently started to incorporate sprints. I remember confiding in my husband one night, and I was like, I just wish like I could just like run away, just like get away, like that Lenny Kravitz song. And I was like, you know what makes me feel kind of like I'm getting away, even though I'm not going anywhere, is I started incorporating sprints. I also started incorporating like lifting weights. I already did, but making sure that I'm staying consistent and still doing it, even on those days that I don't feel like doing it, because it benefits your mental health. It's good for your tenacity, your mental resiliency. There's so many things outside of just like your immediate physical health that lifting weights and exercising can help you with. And you don't even have to necessarily do that, especially if you're freshly postpartum. Obviously, don't hurt yourself, or if you're like not conditioned, ease back into it. But something as simple as strapping your baby to you, or putting your kid in the stroller, or just walking, even if it's just for 20 minutes a day, just getting that movement in definitely helps with, your cardiovascular health, your mental health, and all of the above.
Okay, so much good information that you shared. Thank you for like going into detail about all the different things that are going on in your health coaching business, and like customizing plans for folks and helping them with like fitness and nutrition and different things depending on their goals. I love all of that. So appreciate you sharing, and I think that there are definitely people who benefit from everything you just shared and from following you, and definitely encourage people to reach out to, have a call or a chat to see what other suggestions you have that are specific for them, because it sounds like part of your method is like really being individualized, which makes so much sense because we're all very different. And yeah, I definitely agree with that. This is connected to like homeschool and health coaching and a little bit of homesteading, but can you talk to us? I think you mentioned early on in our conversation meal planning and meal prep. I know that this is like a sticking point for some folks, myself included. Like sometimes it's like 4:59 and I'm like, what's for dinner tonight? I'm actually starting to incorporate a habit for myself that at the latest 9 a.m. I need to know what's for dinner, so that when the day is coming to an end and I'm maybe more tired and just we've been doing a lot, I'm not trying to figure out dinner. I have a meal planner section in my planner, but I'll be honest, I don't get to it every week. And some days, even weeks when I do plan out, this is what we're going to eat, I don't necessarily like use that, or we go off script sometimes. So what's your process or plan or like system for meal planning, meal prep? What does that look like? Any tips, any advice for folks like me who just shared my struggles?
Okay, so yes, meal prepping is actually, I think it really depends on like how you want to go about it, because I don't take a traditional approach. So what I mean by that for me personally, and what I would suggest for people like you who may like, they're like, hey, I made this script, but like I'm not following this script. I would suggest doing what I would like to call like breaking things down by food groups. So, for example, when I go grocery shopping, I pick out the first thing, obviously, outside of the produce, because that's usually the first area where people enter. So I really think about, like, okay, what are the immediate things that my family eats? We eat a lot of vegetables and a lot of fruits. So I may grab like a couple bags of fresh greens, salad greens. I may grab some tomatoes, some avocados. Obviously, if we don't have any at the house, like some fresh peppers, fresh fruits, we eat a lot of fruits. So I might grab a couple bags of apples, a couple bags of oranges, or just one bag of oranges, and at least one bundle of bananas. So then once we get into, you get out of that section and then you end up in either your bakery. I'm just stating for like how it is here in Texas. It could be different in other states, but I'm pretty sure most grocery stores have this similar vibe. It's produce first, and then it kind of takes you into like the bakery section. And then through the bakery section, I end up in the what is it? The meat area, the deli slash like, pre-cuts of poultry and ground beef, etc. So I usually skip the bakery section just because that's just my lifestyle. So we kind of just walk straight past it and we'll go straight to the deli. Say, like, my husband needs some slices of like cheese that are freshly sliced, so they're less processed. And he'll grab whatever he needs to make his lunch for the week. And then I'll proceed to where the meats are. And I grab meats that are what we like to eat. So we really like to eat ground beef. We like to eat chicken and things like that. So I try to grab portions. And this is important for people who are unaware of portion control. I would definitely educate yourself on that, because then you can know how much realistically you as an individual need to eat, and then how much like your spouse needs to eat, especially if you have like a medium sized family. Like, we're a family of five. So it's I had to plan a little bit differently. But when I look at these cuts of meat, say I see like two chicken breasts, right? Yes, these chicken breasts might cost me like $10 to $12, and they might seem oversized. But what I do is I measure, which is a rule of thumb for anybody. I measure with my palm. So I might hold up my palm. You know that chicken breasts do shrink when you cook them. So I'll hold up my palm to one chicken breast, and I'm like, okay, this chicken breast is fairly large. Technically, either I can cut this in half and eat half of this chicken breast, and this is enough for not just me, but also my spouse. And then when it comes to my kids, it's like, okay, if I cut that other chicken breast in half, or if that first chicken breast is still a little bit too large for my palm size, then that means that I'll cut the chicken breast in half, like long ways, kind of like a hot dog bun, and separate it. And then from there, I'll cut that half in half, and half of it'll go to me. And then I'll cut the other one where it's kind of like half of that half, and that will be for my 6 year old and my soon to be 4 year old. And then when we get to things like ground beef, I'll grab something like a 3 pound of ground beef, which will last us 2 days. So now we have 2 days worth of chicken breasts, 2 days worth of ground beef. And then I may have to find in, like, if I'm trying to get groceries for like Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday, then I'll make sure that I have enough protein for all 5 to 6 of those days. So that's kind of how I shop. And then from there, I grab whatever else obviously that I need, like whether we need tortillas or we need something like bread for my husband's sandwiches, or rice cakes or chips, because my husband and kids like to snack on chips and pretzels sometimes, nut butters, making sure we have our healthy fats, obviously eggs, obviously cheese, because it's, necessary in some meals. And then also making sure, if we usually buy them and we don't cook with them all the time, so we always have some kind of an access. But if we need some, then butter. And then also I'm grabbing dairy, so Greek yogurts, cottage cheeses, maybe some half and half, not necessarily whole milk. And we don't even like drink milk every day. So I'm going to kind of walk you through, I hope that this makes sense. I'm going to kind of walk you through what a typical day of eating and or cooking kind of looks like for me and my family. Okay. So, like I said, my kids are a little bit older. So, this is not necessarily going to work for everybody, but this is what works for us. Okay, so a rule of thumb for me as a mom of three is really just to keep things simple, okay? So, say for instance, I'm tired because maybe I stayed up late with my husband the night before watching TV or having a conversation. And I wake up in the morning and my kids are hungry. You know, they usually sometimes wake up before me. In most cases, they wake up before me, telling me that they're hungry immediately. So the first thing that I do is I'll grab some fresh fruit that we have available. So, for example, like those bananas or oranges, I may give them a banana or orange while I'm in the process of making them breakfast. Or in some cases, that's like what they really want. So they end up eating like an apple, an orange, and a banana, and then they're satiated. Yes, that is a lot of sugar, but they're kids. And if you're a parent, then you are aware, like, hey, sometimes you kind of just have to just whatever the kids are going to eat, they're going to eat. But we don't eat a lot of processed foods like cereals and things like that. So if they aren't eating fruit first thing in the morning, then I also pair it with something like oatmeal, which is also something that is converted into sugar as well, believe it or not, because it is a carbohydrate. Even though it does have protein in it, it doesn't have that much protein in it. So I may make them some oatmeal. I'll add in a low glycemic index sweetener like agave, and then I buy frozen fruit from the grocery store. So that way we can obviously cut costs on fresh fruits, especially if like strawberries or blueberries, mangoes, or whatever are out of season. Then we can just throw those frozen ones, maybe like a cup of them, into the oatmeal, and then obviously a little bit of vanilla and whatever other things that you like to add to your oatmeal. I usually make about a cup of that. That's about 4 cups when it gets all swollen up from the water. And that's what breakfast kind of looks like on the average. Occasionally, if I'm feeling fancy, then I may take some flour, a little bit of baking powder, drop an egg, some milk or water, and some cinnamon into a bowl, mix it all up, and make a pancake or a waffle batter for my kids. But if you're going to do that, I would suggest making it in bulk. That's at least what I used to do when I only had one kid. So I would be able to make like a lot of waffles. So I would put the additional waffles that we didn't eat in the freezer. So that way, the next time I wanted to feed my kids something for breakfast and I didn't feel like cooking, the waffles were already pre made and ready to go. So now let's move on to lunch a little bit. Once we get to lunch, usually what I do is I'll do leftovers for my kids from the night before from dinner. But if we don't have any leftovers, then I have to get creative. My go-to usually is like a peanut butter and jelly, or if you want to spice up a traditional peanut butter and jelly, what I'll do is I'll get some chocolate or some caramel rice cakes, and then I will put some banana on there with some peanut butter, and then I will give my kids both each 2 rice cakes each, and that will act as like their lunch for the day. But they also want a snack in between, so their snacks are usually whole foods as well. So it's usually some fruit, or occasionally maybe like some graham crackers or something like that. Now we're at the end of the day, the dreaded end of the day when everybody is tired, including me, and I really believe in keeping it simple. So I'll just give you an example of like last night. So last night I was super tired and I really didn't feel like cooking anything, but I knew that I had a protein, which was ground beef or ground turkey in my freezer. So I made sure that I took that out around lunchtime so that way it was thawed out. And then I was like, okay, well, what can I do with this ground beef? Oh, we have burrito sized pre made tortillas. So I grabbed a tortilla, or I grabbed the tortilla after I cooked the ground turkey, in this case last night. And then I put some of the ground turkey inside of the tortilla with some cheese. Boom, we have quesadillas. And then I served it on the side with some Greek yogurt. And then we had like some canned tomatoes and peppers that we had as like our salsa as well. So it came out really good. Another thing that is another good meal that my kids really like, I call it like my homemade hamburger helper, where essentially I know that we have noodles. I know that we have ground beef. I know we have cheese, and we have half and half. So essentially, I'll cook the ground beef and season it according to what we like. And then after that, I will just add, some half and half into the ground beef, add the cheese, mix it up, make sure I have some boiled noodles, and then put the ground beef with the cheesy goodness over the noodles. Boom, dinner. It's very quick and it's very easy, especially when you don't know what you like, but like, hey, I have these particular ingredients, what can I make? And it kind of takes like the whole, like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to cook, like the stress out of it. And also, what I want to be completely honest with you, I can't speak for every mom, but I can speak for myself. And I was raised on a lot of pre-made foods and like spaghetti. That's what my mom's like go-to thing was, or like mac and cheese, or fried chicken or baked chicken. And so with that being said, we were eating those things constantly, like every single week. So don't be afraid to repeat certain meals, especially if you notice that your family likes them. And maybe even looking at, if you're really like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to cook, I would suggest just walking down those pre-made meal aisles, like the boxed mac and cheeses, the boxed chili, and things like that. And look at the ingredients, like not all of the preservatives and stuff, but just like dissect it. And you're like, okay, beans, ground beef, chili spices, and they also have like cheese. Okay, cool. I can make this at home. And then you get that, if you want to put some sour cream, and in our case we usually use Greek yogurt, and maybe adding, like some tortillas or Fritos, or something like that, to keep it really simple, where yes, you might have some pre-made things sprinkled in here and there. Your processed food items are very minimal though, and they're intentional. And if you really want to get crazy, you can make that stuff from scratch, which I used to, but in our current living situation, it's not necessarily something that I can do at the moment within our space, because it's just not a big space. But yes, those are really like my suggestions. Like, think of things that are really simple, and like kind of be a step ahead, as far as lunch is concerned. Keep it really simple. Think about it, like, what is a lunchable? Like, dissect it. What is a lunchable? Me and my kids and my husband, we all went to like a state park, and I was like, okay, like, instead of me purchasing a lunchable, because this thing is overly priced, it's filled with a whole bunch of preservatives, and it's not going to fill my kids up. They're still going to be hungry. What is something that how can I make this? So I grabbed some slices from the deli, like some ham. I used like 2 slices of cheese from like my husband's lunch cheese that was freshly sliced from the deli. And then I grabbed a box of crackers. And then I just went on ahead. I cut up the cheese, I cut up the meat, and then I put that on the crackers. Boom. My kids had a Lunchable. And then if I really wanted to get really fancy, I added fresh fruit or a granola bar with it, or maybe some pretzels, something along those lines, where it's like kid friendly and really simple. It's simple for you to make, it's simple for them. And you don't have to necessarily be a 5-course chef maker in order for you to have nutritious meals. You just really have to dial in, obviously, on the ingredients of the things that you're eating, and then simplify it. That's my approach personally for meal prepping, because similarly to you, I tried creating this rigid meal plan, and I found myself not necessarily sticking to it. But once I was able to commit realistically to, like, okay, I'm going to write a list of the things that we're going to purchase from the grocery store, and we're only going to purchase these things. I won't even go down the aisles of these other, you know, in these grocery stores, unless I'm either looking for inspiration, or maybe there's one thing that I need, like some oatmeal, which I usually get whole oats, or like the old fashioned oats or rolled oats, but it doesn't have any mixture of anything else besides the oats. And then after I get all of these ingredients, now I have something to play with. And you can even go if you wanted to, which is something that I used to do prior to like not really being so quick witted of like, oh, what do I want to eat? I would even go on Pinterest and just type in like recipes with ground beef, recipes with chicken breasts, and you'll see all of these meals that will pop up. And if you have the ingredients, then boom, like you can make them. But obviously, figuring out what it is like your family likes, do you like to eat like Mexican inspired food or Asian inspired food like we do? So occasionally, I'll try to make an Asian inspired dish like a chicken teriyaki with some rice and maybe some vegetables mixed in there, like edamame and things like that. And my kids really enjoy those types of meals. So I hope that this is helpful. Another thing to keep in mind, if you have like a kid that's like gluten free, or you have like an allergy to those types of grains yourself, I would highly, highly recommend creating like pre-made. So what we used to do before we moved out of our suburban home is I had like a mini muffin tin that I had purchased, or just a regular muffin tin will work. But I would basically get some almond flour and make almond flour muffins for my kids. And you can get really creative. Like for an example, like say I wanted my kids to have like chocolate muffins for the week, I may either incorporate some beets, like fresh beets that I've bought in from the grocery store that I can process myself, where you wash them, you peel them, you cut them up, and then you mash them after you boil them, and then you can add that into your food. Your kids won't really notice as long as you're using like a dark chocolate, then they're not going to be able to really tell. And then you can now have like beets inside of your muffins, or you can make like zucchini muffins, or you can make homemade blueberry, strawberry, or banana nut. Like the process is really unlimited. You can even like just take eggs, get like 5 eggs or 10 eggs and crack them, mix them up, add whatever toppings that you like in them, whether it's peppers, tomatoes, ham, cheese, whatever it is that you like. You can put those in some muffin tins as well. Throw them in the oven for like 10 to 15 minutes, no longer than 20 minutes. And then take them out, and you have a whole week's of breakfast now. And now you can just give your kids, some of them, maybe put that with some fruit as well, if that mini muffin or those large size muffins aren't enough for them, which realistically one large muffin for a toddler should be enough, or a couple mini muffins, like 3 to 4 of them should be enough. And then you can take the rest of them and put them in a Ziploc bag, or you can put them in like whatever reusable container of your choice, store them in the fridge or the freezer, and it's really simple to grab them out for the next day. And you can even leave them on your counter if you want to. But if they have like fresh fruits in them, then if they're not going to eat them within like 3 days, then you should definitely store them in the refrigerator so that way they don't mold. Don't ask me how I know that. I just, I don't ask me, just I found out the hard way, more or less. But yeah, you just keep it really simple, and you don't necessarily have to follow a rigid routine. There's so many fun things that you can make that are super quick and easy. And if you don't want to utilize Pinterest, you don't want to utilize going down like a pre-made aisle, then really just think about the foods that you ate as a child, the foods that you enjoyed, and how you can make them slightly healthier. So an example would be, like, say you really like pizza rolls or hot pockets, right? Okay, how do you make a hot pocket? What does the ingredients consist of? The same ingredients as a pizza. The only difference is that the crust is different. So maybe you might get a pre-made Pillsbury or off-brand pizza crust from the grocery store. You roll it out, you fill it up with your ingredients accordingly, you roll that thing up, slice the top of it so that way there's some air pocket vents, so that way your meal doesn't explode. Throw it in the oven, and then after you take it out of the oven, you can cut that thing into threes, into fours, and half. Now you have a stromboli, aka a hot pocket, and that is a meal for you and your family. And you know what is exactly in there. There's less preservatives. Most of the preservatives are going to come out of the pre-made crust. And if you don't want to use the pre-made crust, you don't have to. There's literally ingredients on the back of flour bags. There's ingredients and, or instructions, I mean, on Google, instructions on the back of the flour bag, instructions on TikTok, where you can find these quick recipes on how to make these things that are less preserved, if that's what you want to do. It kind of varies on like to what degree you want to cook. And either way, you're going to have to do it. I grew up with a mom who, would take the Kraft macaroni and cheese and she would boil the noodles and then have to still put the cheese sauce over it and then mix it up. At the end of the day, she still had to cook that meal. The only difference is she just didn't necessarily know what was in that meal all the way as far as like the cheese sauce was, concerned. But she still had to cook. She still had to put it in a pot or in a bowl and mix everything up. So there's really not necessarily a way of avoiding it. Even if you take it and put it in a microwave, you still have to heat it up. You're still cooking it, you know? So that's just something to keep in mind. Try to just simplify cooking and look at it as like a whole food and how you can put all of these whole foods together to make a meal and keep it really simple. I hope that this was helpful.
Okay, thank you so much for all of this advice around the meal planning and meal prep. And the thing I appreciate about your advice is like it's just super like approachable and real. Like it's not like, okay, we need to have this fancy planner with like these 10 steps to come up with your meals and then, a whole day on Saturday to prep. Like that's what I feel like when I see people who are planning and doing stuff online and like giving advice. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to sit there and prep my meals for the week for like 5 hours on Saturday or Sunday. So I appreciate you so much sharing all of the tips and like real life. This is how you think about it and what you do to make this part of motherhood just a little bit easier. Okay, can you share a resource? It can be a homeschool resource, it can be homesteading resource, it can be a health resource. One resource that is like top of mind for you right now that you're loving, that you're using. If it's not a resource, it could be a tip, but like just what's that one thing that you would share as like this is really you just keep coming back to it, and using often.
So I don't necessarily have a tip for moms out there or a resource. I think that the one biggest takeaway I can give to other moms is just like realizing that perfection is not always the goal and giving yourself grace wherever you are in your homeschooling or life journey, not comparing yourself to what you see on social media, because in most cases, they're only telling a version of the story that they want you to see and not the whole truth.
Okay, so even if that's not a tip or a tool, or rather not a tool, it's a tip, it is so good and really is important because it's social media is a great way to connect with people and learn, and there's a lot of benefit to using social media, but it can also, like you're saying, become this form of comparison that cannot be, feel so good or can make you feel like you're not doing enough or a lot of different things. And so I appreciate you reminding us that it's not the whole picture and, just to try to stay focused on using it for the positive ways to support you and help you. And so I appreciate that. Okay, so we have talked a lot. We talked about like so many things, juggling business and homesteading and meal planning and prep and schedules and staying organized. One thing I know that we touched on it a little bit, but like, how do you use all of this stuff that you are doing? So your business and you're also a landlord and homesteading, and how has that impacted your teaching of your children, right? Like, do you bring them along for those things? Do you include them in the learnings that you have or teach them some of the things that you're doing? How do you include that in the learning of your children? And then is there anything that we didn't get to touch on, anything else that you wanted to chat about before we wrap up our conversation?
Yeah, so to answer your question about me being a landlord and also being a business owner, yes, I do take my kids along this journey. I'm the primary caretaker of my kids, so I'm around them all day. So if I do have to work and take a meeting, then they're not too far away from me. And if we need to drive into town in order to check on our rental property, then yes, they are with me and my husband along for that 3 hour drive. And they usually kind of just see behind the scenes of everything. And we both try to explain to them in a you know, child friendly way, I guess, so that way they can understand the principles of running a business and exactly why we're doing this. Not only, do I love what I do as a health coach, but explaining to them the importance of health. So we really dive deeper into financial health because I think that that is also a portion of holistic health that a lot of people were not taught in the traditional school system or even taught by their parents. And so as me and my husband have been learning more and more, we expose our children to it in like little microscopic ways so that way as they get older, we can break these topics down a little bit further in a way that they can also still understand. And since we're starting so young with them, like I said, youngest my youngest at the time when I started my entrepreneurial journey, she is now, how old is she? Oh my goodness, my brain is like losing my mind. My daughter's 3 and she'll be 4. And then my oldest, he's 6. And then I also have a baby, but we're not counting him. But I started my entrepreneurial journey when my daughter was a baby. And so she's kind of really seeing it and growing up in this type of environment. So it's not really something that's like confusing or taboo to her. She is just thinking like this is just regular life. Like, oh, okay, we lived in a house in the suburbs and now that's our rental property. Whereas my son, it kind of took him a little bit longer to really accept that that is our reality and that that is what's happening. And soon enough, he will see why we're doing this a little bit more, especially as he ages. But right now, some concepts are still harder for him to kind of wrap his mind around. We also plan on creating different things for our children so that way they really understand financial literacy, especially as homeschooling kids. So we actually, my dad, he already set up like bank accounts or savings accounts and their names for them that they'll be able to access when they become older. And then my husband and I also have a life insurance policy that will be passed down to them. But we plan on adding that to a living trust so that way it can just be continuously passed down. So our children don't necessarily have to start from square one the same way that we have. And really, we have been diving deep into the legalities of all of these different things so that way we can familiarize ourselves with them to create generational wealth because me and my husband both came from poverty. So it's really important to us that our children don't find themselves in those types of living circumstances for their life. As far as anything else that I would like to talk about, I think to close this out, I would really love to talk about, I guess, like food and parenthood. I think that we briefly talked about this, but I don't think that we talked about this from this specific angle. So I really want to talk about the micro habits that we have as parents that really affect our children as far as food is concerned. So for example, my husband likes to drink, energy drinks and stuff. I don't touch that stuff because it gives me the jitters, but he really likes it. And so those habits, my kids see them and they're like, oh, wow, like, can I taste it, And I really don't think that in today's society, enough of us take responsibility for how our eating habits, our kids are watching and they're going to try to emulate. So I feel like as parents, we really need to take a step back and think about the overall legacy and relationship with food that we want to pass down. We always think about like money, what we want to pass down to them, or education, how we want them to have the best education. But when you actually look into the scientific studies that your muscular skeletal health, primarily your muscular health, though, is the very first like thing that's going to show how long you can live for, you really have to think about your kids, because there are so many adults, but also there's so many kids that are experiencing obesity and other, diseases prematurely due to diet. And I believe that's just because parents aren't really taking the time out to educate themselves on the foods that they are eating, and then also trickling that down and explaining it to their kids. I think that it's so easy for us to just pick something pre-made up off of the shelf because we think that it's a lot simpler. But if you really think about it, it's really not. I kind of want to go back to a meal that I make pretty often for my family when I'm feeling lazy. It's like my own DIY hamburger helper, right? So let's break down this meal, right? I have some panini noodles. I have some heavy cream, some cheese, whatever cheese I have on hand. I add my seasonings, and then ground beef, of course. Now, let's go back to the stuff that is in the box, right? You grab it and it has the noodles. It doesn't come with the ground beef, so you still have to cook the ground beef. And it comes with this mysterious sauce in some cases, or a powder where you just add water and then it creates a sauce. Now, if you could just take like 2 more seconds, because it really doesn't take that long to pour some milk or some half and half into the cooked meat, and then throw some cheese over top of it and season it and mix it all up with the panini, you have legit hamburger helper with that is entirely less processed. And a lot of people, I hear it so much on social media and in people I meet, like, oh, it's just convenient. And I feel like convenience, yes, like even I, grab something off of the shelves here and there, like granola bars, even though I can make them at home, especially right now because we kind of travel a little bit more. But when we're not traveling and I can, just take a few seconds, not only is it saving me a lot of money creating these things at home, but it's also really beneficial to my health. And I think that we just, as adults, need to hold ourselves accountable that we can, in fact, be one of the reasons why our kids may be sick. We are, always talking about, oh, like it can be environmental. It can be environmental, which is why it's important to really like look at yourself. Like, I can't sit here and say, oh my gosh, where did my son get eczema from? I know where he got it from because I have it. Okay, so if that's the case, then I need to be not only informed about my health, but also informed enough to support my son through this journey. So that way he doesn't end up, and I'm not trying to seem 100% against Western medicine, but I am 100% against putting children prematurely on medication when through diet and lifestyle you can significantly see change. So I really want parents to consider that and really just sit with themselves, journal, whatever it is that they need to do, or even talk to a professional and educate themselves as well on the healthcare system, because I am not a doctor myself, but my sisters are doctors and my dad also has a PhD. And so when I'm talking to these people and listening to these interviews that I've had to listen to and engage with when I was doing my health coaching training, there's been multiple doctors who have said, like, hey, at some point throughout medical school, especially for people who are pending graduation, these medical students are being approached by big pharmaceutical companies that are up and coming, and they say, hey, we will give you a pretty large commission if you can just push these medications for us. And in some cases, they're just pushing the medications because they need it, financially to take over whatever bills they have personally. It's not necessarily because it's benefiting somebody. In some cases, it can benefit somebody, but in most cases, it's really just about greed. So also, educate yourself on that as well. Like I said, by no means am I against it. The Western medical system, I feel like it has its place. If you need a surgery and things like that, then yes, you should definitely go to the hospital and get your blood work done, make sure that you're okay. But just be aware of the current state of this medical system, especially in comparisons to other countries in the world. Because if you look at these other medical systems, they have better technology than we do, meaning that their tests are a lot more accurate and they can detect things a lot more sooner. And they're also more likely to tell people to change their diet and exercise before they intervene with over the counter medication. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, I'm so glad you added that last piece. Definitely a reminder for me because we don't do the hamburger helper like in the box. I do similar to what you shared, just like an easy, noodles and burger or hamburger meat and sauce. I try to do like a can of tomatoes versus like the jarred sauce just for lower sodium. But even though the cans do have more sodium. But anyways, we are definitely a box mac and cheese family like that. And that is totally a convenience thing. So I appreciate the like, you know what? It actually doesn't have to be that hard. Just put the milk and the cheese and melt that with the macaroni versus like the powder box. So I appreciate you sharing that reminder and, encouragement and push for myself. And I'm sure many people who are listening will, you know, appreciate and need that reminder too. So, and then so good, like how you're bringing your kids along. And to your point, like it's just their life, right? They're like, oh, we own this property, we have these businesses, and that's just like the norm because they don't know anything different, which, can be eye-opening for them as they get older so they know what is out there and possible. So love that so much. So grateful. Thank you so much for this conversation. The final thing is just an opportunity for you to remind everyone where they can find you online. So any website or social media, and then anything you have that you want folks to check out, I can link in the show notes for them. But just if people want to stay connected, where should they go? And then anything coming up, that's the final piece. I'm so grateful. Thank you again for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I definitely appreciate this conversation. It's encouraged me to think about things that are the norm to me and actually start an additional gratitude practice. So I do appreciate you as well. If people want to follow along on our journey, they can find me on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, and my website, which is trueaurahealing.com. All of my social tags are the same as well, which are True Aura Healing. And as far as new projects, I currently have a free one-on-one available for people to have a quick little conversation with me where we can kind of come up with a customized plan for them individually as to what their health goals are. And that link is in my bio, on all my socials, as well as my direct website where they can book today. So yeah, thanks again for having me.
Awesome. Thanks again, Shanielle. I love this conversation, and I am about to go to your bio and grab that link too because I would love a customized plan. So everybody else, go run and hurry up and get that. And I'm so grateful. I really, really appreciate you sharing all of your knowledge, expertise, and experiences with me and with everyone who will listen to this. This Voxer channel will stay open, but we can chat on social media too because I definitely want to stay in touch and continue to follow your journey. So thanks again. Bye.